out. I can just do that in the editing side. Just take out the mandolin and the voice. The whole thing, really. Alright, let's start the show. Hello and welcome to another edition of Hop Heroes, a show where we talk about our favorite drinks and our favorite heroes. I'm your host, Jordin, and with me as always, we have talented artist and comic enthusiast, J.R. Gonzalez.
Sup?
What's up, buddy? How you been, man? Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
Yeah, it was good. Fulfilling as food-wise as can be, and family members all week. It's been okay. I'm just joking. They've been great.
It's been just okay. that sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds like the holidays. Right on. Got some good food in. Got some good family time in.
Good family. Yep, it was a pretty good week. I mean, it flew by, right? I mean, it's already Sunday, so I know.
Yeah,
it's a good week.
Crazy.
So yeah,
absolutely crazy. We're already in December. Right on, man. Then we got our third host, Zach Barlow. How you living, kid?
I'm living pretty good, Jordan. What do I look like right now?
A lumberjack.
Yeah.
You look like somebody is wearing a lumberjack costume. Like you're not.
Yeah.
You don't look like an actual.
You know, it's funny that I look like a lumberjack, Jordan, because you know what I did today?
Made your fiance chop down a tree.
That's not what I did. I walked into the forest in boots and mud, put my knees in the mud, took a handsaw, Jordan, a handsaw, cut a tree down, hauled the tree to a truck, drove the truck home, threw the tree on my mahogany floors, looked at Alicia and said, "Bring me Christmas." And you know what she's doing right now? Death. She's doing just that, Jordan. Just that.
Well, the good thing about Zach, everybody, and I'm sure you know this if you're listening, is that he likes to film these events and share them with the world. So if you follow him on Instagram, you'll know that none of that actually happened. And Alicia was chopping down the tree while he was giving updates throughout and critiquing her form. So there's two sides.
The world will never know the truth.
Yeah, well, the world knows the truth. Zach will never accept the truth. That's what it sounds like. But no, man, that's awesome. So you guys got your Christmas tree, went out and chopped it down like some legit fucking goddamn Americans. Yeah, cut down your own tree.
America.
Did you put that lumberjack outfit on after the fact, or were you wearing that the whole time?
Oh, I was wearing this the whole time.
Okay, because it doesn't look dirty, like, at all. So
dude, this is for the YouTube.
There's no YouTube today.
Oh shit, there's no YouTube. For our listeners, I got dirt stains on my jeans.
He's got a couple dust spots. It's like little dust spots.
Yeah. Looks like he was kneeling on the ground on his mahogany floors while he was Yeah, our fourth member of the team, Vinny McBroom, our guy in the chair, he's out with a family event tonight. 'Tis the holiday, so we will not be having video for this episode, but we'll be coming back with that shortly. So, yeah, today we are talking House and Powers of X, the new X-Men story arc, and we are drinking Celebration IPA from Sierra Nevada. So, a few reasons why we're drinking Celebration as we go into our beverage breakdown. It's one of the trending beers on Untappd right now, which is a very awesome beer app. If you don't have it, hop on it. If you enjoy beer, it tells you what's trending, what's new, and it also tells you where to find it in your local area. So definitely recommend that. We're all on it. Hop on, follow us, and we'll post out some suggestions and obviously feed off your guys' as well. But the Celebration IPA is one that is trending currently globally, and for good reason. It's the first kind of holiday beer introduced to the market typically for Sierra Nevada. It originated in 1981, and it blazed the trail for kind of American-style IPAs. Which are more usually citrusy and focus on the hops and the bitters as opposed to the body or the alcohol content. And also gave a new take on the holiday beer, because usually when you go to holiday beer, you get a lot of spice, some sweet sometimes, that stout, that warm feeling. And they went kind of just off on their own path. They did IPA, they did citrus, they did pine, they did all this other stuff to kind of keep it a sharp IPA, but I think the pine adds a little bit of the holiday flair. So JR and I will be drinking. Zach is amidst his lumberjack cleanse. So more power to you on that, big dog.
A lumberjack that doesn't drink.
The lumber
pancakes and syrup, baby. The lumber cleanse, dude. I love that. Just smelling cedar. All right, so you going straight out the bottle? You pour this in a glass, JR?
I do bottles. I mean,
What do you get from the nose? You get anything stick out to you?
Definitely, you definitely got like a strong hop smell for sure. There's not really kind of like usually what I'm used to is like floral kind of smelling, you know, like there's a little bit of a mask in there, but I feel like this is just gonna be really awful. This smells like hops and water.
Oh man, I miss drinking with you, buddy. Yeah,
It smells like hops and water.
I get a little bit of citrus. I get a little bit of like lemon.
It says layered pine and citrus hops, aromas balanced delicately. I don't smell any citrus, but I'll taste it. Let me taste it.
I feel like the smell also is harder to come by with in the bottle. Like if you pour it into a glass normally,
Yeah.
it releases like a lot of the
Okay.
smell.
And the color's almost like an auburn, a little mapley. It's not quite IPA like that yellowish hue. It's got a real dark brownish
It's pretty dark
red.
for an IPA.
Yeah. This is the first time I had this one.
It's exactly what I thought. It's not.
Hoppy water.
Yeah.
So you love it.
It's like
It's like
someone.
wet cereal.
Exactly. They just put like a bathtub full of hops and put water in there and let it set over the weekend. No,
Sounds delicious, man.
no, it's not the worst, but it's not. I mean, it's nothing special. I mean, I'm a celebration here. I'm looking for like this big pizzazz, you know, this walk in the.
Fuck yeah! Celebrate!
This walk in
that what
the
you want?
middle of a fantastic beer, and I'm tasting just a normal beer that I guess it's
Not impressed. Do you get any holiday vibe from it at all?
not at all. I mean, it tastes like
God, I wish we had video
I know.
of JR.
I know.
I just
Well,
yeah.
I get more floral and pine than I do. I think I do citrus. I get a little hint of lemon at the end, but yeah, the only thing that stinks holiday to that is the label on the bottle and the pine. But other than that, I don't get any holiday. So
Is the pine like
does-
pretty strong?
it's not like gin. Like it doesn't taste like straight juniper berries, but it has like
I
an
wish.
underlying like pine. I know it does give me that pine taste. That's like probably the most prominent flavor I would say. But I don't get a whole lot of citrus from it, and I don't get. I guess when I think of holiday, like I said before, you think of spice, or even like a little sweet, and I don't get any of that. So it's really hard to like. I could have this year round and not think of it as a holiday beer, but I like it. I think it's delicious.
Yeah.
The three hops that it does feature, it features Cascade, Chinook, and Centennial. Cascade's going to be a citrus and a floral hop. Centennial's a citrus and a floral hop, and then Chinook is a bitter and the pine hop. So I think the Chinook is the most prominent here, at least, and I get a lot more floral than I would citrus. 6.8% ABV and 65 IBU, so it's right in the middle of the kind of the bitterness scale there, and it's pretty high on the ABV. 6.8, that's pretty strong. So basically, I think it's a good beer. I think it's definitely sessionable. I could drink several of these, but I don't get the holiday feel from it. Maybe it's just because it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's December 1, you know? We're not at Christmas yet, but this is just here's a little pine tree for you.
Sounds
the
sounds
first
like it's
little
not
square.
it's not the greatest ever in the world.
It's not the greatest ever in the world, but it is. I think it's very. I think.
Would
it's
you
very
rate
easy
it?
to drink?
Or let me ask you a more specific question. Is it worth trending to be the number one trending beer right now?
I think that the only reason that it's trending right now is because it's considered a holiday beer. If it was not a holiday beer, I don't think it'd be trending right now. But it's an easy drinkable beer, and it's good, and it has a holiday theme to it. So
Fair
it's
enough.
just good marketing from Sierra Nevada, if you ask me.
Yeah.
That's what I got from that. So that's our beverage breakdown. We've been reading these X-Men comics for months now, so I'm very excited to get into this story time with JR. What do you got for us, JR? Are you going to go house and then powers? You guys can combine the two.
I'm gonna
Explain
go-
what the readers need to know.
Yeah, so there's there's an order to this story, and it's actually House of X and Powers of 10 is what it's called. Powers of X.
Oh.
So just depends on who you're talking to, but I've heard Jonathan Hickman call it Powers of 10.
Interesting.
And so Jonathan Hickman is obviously the writer, and this is another story I think where the writer is the strongest value to this instead of the art. The art is great; it makes it better. But I feel like Jonathan Hickman takes this to another level. And I've heard people describe Jonathan Hickman as the god of writers of comic books because of the way he does things. And so
that's quite a title.
What the fuck?
It is, and if you know a little bit anything about Jonathan Hickman, which I guess we can go into a little bit about him, is he's written some stories. I mean, the Ultimate Fantastic Four, to the New Avengers, and the X-Men stories. And what Jonathan Hickman has done is everything that he's ever written can be tied in together. So if you were to get like a Jonathan Hickman, like let's say collection. You could start with Ultimate Fantastic Four, move into Secret Wars, move into X-Men or New Avengers, and then move into X-Men, and they would all connect somehow. There's some kind of reference to each story in there. And so that's
pretty sick.
It is, and that's kind of why they talk to him about being the god of writers, because what he does is he's created a universe, and if anybody's read this, he created a whole universe, a whole world of X-Men here. And anytime you talk about X-Men, there's only a couple writers that you really kind of mention. Even the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, even they weren't the great, and they created X-Men, right? They weren't even. You talk about Chris Claremont, which we kind of did the Dark Phoenix, like you talk about him, and now Jonathan Hickman's kind of involved in that conversation of best X-Men stories. But he's also had some really good, intense stuff. I mean, it's really good stuff. So, but I wanted to kind of give a quick prehistory, or a history, not prehistory, a history of kind of how events started. And if you're a comic book reader or you're an X-Men enthusiast, you kind of know that X-Men have always gone through this turmoil, right? There's always some hate or some violence or something that that changes the path of where they're going, right? Like there's always some kind of major event, and it kind of starts off with the House of M. I don't know if you've ever heard about the House of M. We'll probably do a story about that, but that's where the Scarlet Witch took out the mutant gene out of all the mutants. So almost took the right, and then you go into the X-Men Messiah complex, where the first mutant born after that, Hope comes to life, and then you got Avengers versus X-Men, which happened, about 5-6 years ago. And all those stories where Professor X kind of dies, gets shot in the head, I think, every single time. And it's kind of funny. He always gets shot in the head. Well, I guess that makes sense. That's his weapon of choice, right? But it kind of leads to this story. At that time, Professor X is dead. And so there's kind of a really cool thing that I found out about this is the Professor X in this storyline is actually not his body anymore. He actually took over a different body called he was an X-Force guy. I'm not sure if he was a mutant, but his name is Phantom X, and Phantom X had different parts, different hearts, different parts of his body, and he made a deal with him to go into the astral plane to be a totally different, like, be off in this world where he, like, it's much easier for him. But he actually took his body. So that mask you're seeing is actually not, that's why you never really see his face, because it's actually not his body anymore. It's somebody else.
What?
Yeah.
What? How did you find that out?
Yeah,
why
dude,
is that
that's
not in the story?
Not what I read, bro. Like, that's all.
It's not
that's
even
not
brought
Professor
up.
X?
It is Professor X. He took over, but it's not his body. He's actually dead many times over, but he actually took someone else's body and he made a deal with it. Did I write down what? It's actually,
I did notice that it was crazy that Professor X was just walking around now all of a sudden,
and
he was kind of fit. I'm like, wait a minute, I thought Professor X was always in a wheelchair.
He was
and
like
now
prancing
Professor
around.
X is like got this dope ass helmet, and he wears like black turtlenecks and shit, and he's like.
He looked like Steve Jobs, like with a fucking
He looks like a New York
about that
Manhattan businessman,
and his body language is super like feminine almost. He's just like very.
It's actually it's really an intense story. It's even further in where his brain actually gets stolen by the Red Skull, Professor X's brain. Like it's like a really. We should probably do this one day where we kind of.
What story are you reading?
This is a different story, right? This isn't.
Yeah, this is just prehistory.
So
I wanted to kind of go into kind of why you don't really see his mask that often or his face, at all once he wears the mask, right? There's you don't really see his face. And if you ever read the Secret Wars book, there's actually Richards is has anybody talked to you guys about the Ultimate Universe and how Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Fantastic Four? Well, there's the Ultimate Reed Richards actually looks just like this Professor Xavier. So there's kind of that homage to kind of that helmet and that kind of Jonathan Hickman again. He kind of wrote all that. But that's kind of the history of X-Men in the last, decade or so, which has been pretty intense. But I wanted to kind of throw that out there, and obviously
you blew my mind from the start. So now I'm lost. So let's just
it's okay. It's just it's a new starting point, and that's kind of the point I wanted to make. Is if you're reading X-Men, you can start all over from this. Like this is a new beginning, right? This is a new world. I'm gonna read kind of the intro right here for Professor Xavier, and it's humans of the planet Earth. While you slept, the world changed. And that's Professor Xavier. And that's kind of how the story starts, right? Jonathan Hickman does these things where a lot of people think it's a maze, but actually what he does is he puts several different parts of a story in several different areas and gradually moves them into the center till everything makes sense. And that's kind of what this story is about. So it's kind of it's kind of a big deal, I think it's kind of a big deal as a comic book reader. So
yeah, I remember that, like the opening scene you see again in like the closing scene and like the sitting on the park bench. They reference that with Moira, like they go back there several times.
Right. Yeah,
so
and
it's kind of
all comes together. Yeah.
That speech that Professor X gives when he says, "While you slept, the world changed." I feel like when he says that, it doesn't sound. It's very menacing sounding to me. Yeah, like it's very much just like, guess what, motherfuckers, we are the apex now. Like
don't change.
Yeah. I feel like Professor X, Professor X ideologically gets a lot closer to like what Magneto's traditionally been in this series, because normally Professor X is kind of just like, oh, we got to live peacefully, and clearly we know why, and we can get into that, but I thought that was like a real interesting move for Professor X to be like, all right, fuck it, Magneto's right, let's do this. Yep, all right,
dude. Yeah, he let his dick out in this. He was just like, fuck being nice, fuck being polite, dick's on the table, let's go to battle. Like, this is what's happening. It was fucking awesome.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I think Jonathan Hickman wanted to have that by the way he looks too. Like his suit is all black, like, and he's just got this helmet. He's not attached to nothing. Like Professor Xavier always had to have someone push him, or he looked really weak and inviting.
Right.
Cerebro was attached to a machine, and this time Cerebro is he's wireless basically, and he's walking around in this very unique. He's got this smile on his face the whole time, and it is very menacing. That's a really good point, and you see.
I got a Del Toro vibe, and it wasn't like the fact that he was super like extreme creature or anything. It's just like his style, the way he carried himself. Have you seen the Labyrinth?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Del Toro, there's that thing there's that thing that puts his hand in his face, like the way it walks around. It always has his hands covering his face. Like,
yeah.
I don't know why, but I got that kind of vibe from him. He's just like very confident, but kind of like didn't know what the fuck he was thinking. Never saw his actual face, and he just like trotted around and like talked about his kids and everything. I don't know. It was kind of creepy and menacing, like you're saying, and not at all the Professor X that you're used to getting.
The character design for Professor X just like was really cool to me, because it like insinuated this level of power without him being, like you said, menacing, and also he's not very large. And like the people that would look at him with respect would be Magneto, who's just clearly a freaking beast, and then Apocalypse, who's clearly just this huge monster, and it'd be like Apocalypse, Magneto, and then Professor X, this little dude in a turtleneck with like this helmet on, but you knew that Professor X was like the guy out of those that three, and I felt like that was a cool character design. I believed it. It.
Me too.
So, what we'll do is kind of go into a little bit of story. We're obviously, we don't want to do spoiler alerts here because we want people to read and get involved. And, but we'll do some
spoilers.
We'll try not to.
We'll try to, but
spoilers.
I think what I want is I don't want to go through each individual panel or each individual story. I'll just kind of like pick, like some really cute
we'll
points.
just forewarn when you give a spoiler alert so listeners can tune off if they don't want to hear what happens.
But we definitely want you guys to listen and hopefully, kind of be interested enough to go and buy it, right? To kind of realize, okay, I want to read this because of what we're saying and those kinds of things. So,
for sure.
So one of the big things that Jonathan Hickman does, like I said, is he starts stories from a very different spot, almost the opposite spot where you think he wants to go, and he puts all these points in there. And in the beginning of the story, you kind of see these panels, and there's this flower being picked and then planted in various spots throughout, let's say, the world, right? And you're kind of wondering what's going on here. And so what he's introducing, which is not a new character or a new concept, is the see if I can say it, Krakoa plants or island, and he's planting pieces of that island in different areas, and it kind of switches over to a point where where their ultimate plan is going, what they want to do for a mutant race. And they're trying to. You can kind of see these things coming together with the plant, and then there's some other governments coming to see them in their place of, I guess, what do you call it, like an embassy for them somewheres,
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking to kind of sell this drug, which is flower produces for humans, and it acts different for humans than it does for mutants. And for humans, it's much more of a bigger. Much more of a bigger impact, I feel. For the flowers of Krakoa is the mutant island of Krakoa is not just a home for mutants, but the seat of their nation state. It is also the only known producers of the primary economic a resource of the mutant nation, the flowers of Krakoa. And they give you, in the book, they give you kind of descriptions of what they are. Human drug L, human drug high, human drug M. And it gives you descriptions on what they do. Let's see, I could just read one for example.
Cure cancer, make you live longer, cure mental illness,
yes.
Cure. It's essentially just like a game-changing pharmaceutical product that the island creates through mutant powers that make it so, humans can live longer and don't have to fear disease. I mean, it's a huge thing, and the purpose of it in the story is it gives the mutant nation trading capacity. Yes. And market kind of dominance, honestly. A market dominance, and they leverage that market dominance to recognize their own kind of nation state.
Exactly, and it's kind of just like anything else. Like Wakanda had the vibranium, so they were there's no number dollar amount what they're worth because they had this vibranium that nobody else had, and it actually plays a key role towards the end, and so it gets brought up towards the end. Mm-hmm. But you kind of throughout the story, you kind of see the happiness that the island is bringing to the X-Men, and then you kind of seeing where Hickman is trying to get you guys to see where the X-Men are going, right? So there's a lot of these panels of characters that we've never seen before or haven't seen in a new light. Sabretooth is back in here in kind of the old Sabretooth vintage way with his, violence and killing everybody. Oops, I broke his neck. He's small, weak. Sorry, and
Sabretooth sucks, dude.
Yeah.
Dude, yeah.
So there's kind of this it's kind of great to see all these characters, right? I mean, in the new light, and Cyclops is kind of the other one that kind of you get to see in a new light and a new way. And I know, flexing Zach and
Cyclops is a savage, bro. He's so
brooding.
dope. He's the best.
And
I would like to interrupt this program for 1 second to ask Jordin one question I've been waiting all month to ask. Where is Gambit, my guy? Where's he at?
Dude, he didn't make the cut in this storyline.
He didn't even make the cut. We can't even compare the two anymore. I just need you to know.
Some honeys.
For all of our listeners, we've already given a survey. He hasn't even made the cut in this new story. It's non-comparable.
It's not a popularity contest for this story.
He's a god king of war.
Story, Rogue wasn't in the story either. And Rogue's a huge character. You can't just say that. Come on.
I thought Rogue was in the story. There's a moment when somebody gets reincarnated. Well, might be a little spoiler. But
that was Jean. That was Marvel Girl.
There's somebody right after Jean, and then Storm goes to, and then she goes, no touching.
That's not.
That
that's
was
not
famine.
Rogue.
That was famine.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's not
I
Rogue.
thought that's
Yeah.
okay.
So I will
Yeah.
tell you, there's a reason.
There's some big names left out. All right.
All I'm saying is that
Just saying.
Cyclops is the god king of war. And
There's no
we
Iceman
can't
either.
compare the
Who's an
two
original
anymore.
X-Men?
It's not
Iceman wasn't
comparable.
in this, dude.
Yeah.
Just not comparable.
Did you
There's.
say he's the god of war? Is that what you said?
God king of war. Yes.
Oh my god.
Um.
I
now
will
that-
say for Zach's pleasure, I will say this is the best and the coolest I've ever seen Cyclops. Was this story arc?
Yeah.
He did not piss me off in this story arc.
There's kind of it's kind of like he had to like reestablish himself in a good way, because after Avengers versus X-Men, he was kind of like the ultimate bad guy. He had the Phoenix, in his body, and he tried to kill everybody. Basically, is what Cyclops tried to do.
God king of war. Just
so
another
they-
Which
side
is
of
better
it,
than
same
trying.
thing.
This is better than trying to fuck everybody, which he's normally trying to do.
That's
so like,
true.
Still,
pick
God
a
king
poison
like-
of
with
war.
Cyclops.
We're
I feel like he gave
different
up on
sides
that.
of the same thing here.
And so enters Magneto, and Magneto, these group of people who were going to kind of view kind of what the X-Men are up to with this flower, enters the ambassador of Krakoa, which is Magneto, and everybody's
All right,
scared.
is it
of Magneto.
Krakoa or is it Krakoa? Yeah,
it's Krakoa.
Krakoa.
Okay.
I'm gonna get
Yeah.
it wrong the whole time.
Okay.
I know it. Krakoa.
that's kind of JR's signature.
I got you, bro.
has his
I
own-
got you.
Well,
Yeah,
the problem is you
pronouncing things.
say it one way in your head, and then you try to go in the other out your mouth. It like spins the other way out. So that's my biggest problem. brain is just like ricocheting all the time with words. But anyways,
I love it. Keeps us on our toes.
and so anyways, at this point, I mean, Magneto is telling these people, hey, we're gonna do what we're gonna do. We're just kind of letting you know, we're the bosses, and we're actually we're the gods, and just be aware, And that's kind of the end of part one of,
Magneto doing Magneto things.
pretty much saying, hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna just let you know, we're gonna do this, but we're giving you the courtesy of telling you. And that's kind of like, you can kind of see the partnership between him and Xavier. They're kind of maybe feeding off each other a little bit, and that's
And what actually is the proposal? Because like we have the flowers and everything, but what are they drawing in the sand for mankind in part one?
well, at this point they want the Krakoa to be an actual nation, because at this point there's no like democratic, or there's nothing saying that, hey, you're like Africa or you're like America. They're this almost hostile state at this point. So that's what they want to do.
On top of that,
Krakoa
they
is
want
like
to be
alive.
They want to be recognized as a sovereign nation,
Yes.
and they also want mutants all around the world to have diplomatic immunity, and then be transferred to Krakoa for mutants to be able to rule mutants under mutant law. So essentially, they want all mutants to no longer be governed by any law of any other nation, to have immunity, sent back to Krakoa, and they'll judge themselves, judge, jury, executioner, that kind of legal kind of structure.
Right.
Yeah, and that happens like mid-trial with Sabretooth too, because like they're like he's on basically death row, and Emma Frost comes in and is like,
Yeah.
he's a mutant, he's safe, and then
Right.
that shit rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah. Definitely, because there's a purpose for it, and there's like an almost like, it's very political almost at every point for them, and they're like,
It is.
every angle of what they're doing has to be done a perfect way because of this storyline, and that is just like the tip of everything. And obviously the next order is Powers of X #1.
Fun fact.
Go ahead.
Let me just throw a fun fact in there. That's happened in my knowledge a couple other times where certain people have wanted to be recognized as their own sovereign nation. Once African Americans through the Black Panthers, they wanted to be recognized as their own sovereign nation, and they wanted to rule themselves and have their own government and laws, and then judge themselves. And then again, as Native American tribes.
Yes. And
Fun fact.
and being a sovereign nation is kind of a big deal. In fact, what my job is, I deal a lot of like the Mukushu tribe and the Puyallup tribe. They actually have this similar like, hey, we want to abide by the rules, but just so you know, we don't have to if we don't like it kind of attitude.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of is, but it's kind of not, and it's real complicated. And this is a comic book podcast,
Yeah,
so
so it's complicated, but it's
So let's
let's
more
just move right past that.
it's
Let's
complicated.
dive deeper.
Let's dive deeper.
Let's just
get into the
different examples of
brass
sovereign
tacks.
nation requests in political history 101, brought to you by your friendly hop heroes. Here we go.
And it's nothing
Cheers.
bad. I just have, they're great. I mean, it's not like it's run, most of the time it's run by people who know what they got to do to get done. It's about money and making money and casinos and blah, blah, blah. So nothing bad, but it is a very touchy subject. And just as this is, it's a very touchy subject with Magneto. And he's like,
Right.
I'm going to do what I got to do.
Right. And you can see why humans would be like, what the fuck? Are you serious? Because think about it. I mean,
Time out.
yeah, exactly.
If I was the humans, yeah, not
Yeah. Because I mean, think about it. Because as a human, if you have somebody like Sabretooth who literally just killed people, and then you have somebody like Emma Frost who's like, yeah, I get it, like he just killed your buddy, but he's a mutant, so he can't be in jail. He's got immunity to that. Your laws don't matter anymore. Like, I feel like that's like not an easy pill to swallow for any human ever. You know what I mean? That's a huge ask.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why the flower was such a huge bargaining chip, because obviously what they're asking for is borderline ridiculous, but they're also providing this new medicine that will save millions of lives. And so it's like, I mean, it's ridiculous, but at the same time, like, no more cancer or Alzheimer's.
Yeah, what they're providing is equally as ridiculous, just in the other way and in the good way. So it's kind of like the stakes are high on both sides of the scale.
Right.
Yeah, that's a tough decision to make. It's tough.
Yeah, exactly.
Tough bill to sign, I guess. Okay, so that's the proposal from Xavier, and the coolest part here is that obviously Xavier and Magneto are teaming up and having the same vision, which has happened in the past, but it always goes awry. They always eventually split. But in this, there seems to be some actual hope that they could actually team up and stay together.
Yeah, like Professor Xavier is actually starting to lean more towards Magneto's way instead of the other way around, which has never really worked at all. Because Magneto's like, nope, I'm gonna kill you.
And why? What is turned Xavier?
So this
not
is
to the dark side, but
this
being
is
more open-minded.
This is the next part that I think is very important, and enters Moira Taggart. And Moira Taggart actually is, in the past, has always just been kind of Professor Xavier's kind of girlfriend, and kind of help him develop these students and mutants and figuring out what their powers are. So she would take them in, and she would tell them, okay, this is what you're good at, this is how you do it, and then tell Professor Xavier and help him teach them to use that in the right way and help be kind of assimilated into society. And I think that's kind of her role been in the past. And in this book, things have changed big time. Like, she didn't used to be a mutant. Now she's a mutant. And they kind of go through her storylines, and there's 10 lifespans that they kind of discuss in this book, and each one is a specific way. There's even a deeper thing to this that I did not look into, but there's from what I understand, each lifespan actually is like an old story, part of an old story, like past of future, or the day of future past, some other stuff. I mean, it's so deep. I was like, I'm not going to be here for a century. What's up, Z?
Yeah. So Moira, I just want to kind of just like, because Moira is so important that I just want to like kind of spend a little bit of time on Moira. Moira's power is that when she dies, she gets reincarnated, but she remembers everything from her past life. And the rule kind of that we know of right now as readers is that she gets 10 of these total.
Right.
So her first life, she doesn't even realize she's a mutant. She's like, I'm just a person. She ends up being a teacher. She marries some dude. She lives until she's like 74, and then she dies of natural causes, and that's her life, and it's awesome. Then she finds herself in her mother's womb again, and she remembers everything from her past life, and she realizes, oh fuck, I'm a mutant. And that's kind of when it starts, life 2. And then, I don't know if we probably can't go through each one because that's just doing the most, but basically she learns from each life, and she transfers that knowledge almost every time to Professor Xavier, and then in other lives to Magneto, and then ultimately to Apocalypse, in an attempt to save mutants from an inevitable fucking doom.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, so it's very. So you're saying, Jr., that she didn't have this power previously.
And
This is a new.
This is a new thing. They've never actually, from what I remember, never was a mutant. She's always just been that helper, that kind of part of the greater thing, but not really anything significant. Like it. This is
Gotcha.
completely different. She's very significant.
Yeah, like I mean, I would argue that she's the protagonist in this whole arc because everything kind of revolves. I mean, it's like, or you can consider it like what's our debate in Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan.
Who's the main character?
Who's the main character? But Mora, I mean, this power is so significant, and from what I understood, she is reincarnated, but she also goes back to when like the time she was born. Like she's
Yes.
So she relives the same life over and over again and tries to find solutions elsewhere. And it's very interesting thinking of that mindset in a child. Like if you've had 10 lives, full lives already, and you're back into a child's form. But also she ends up running into so many different obstacles that she changes sides she's trying different things. Like she's teamed with Xavier. At first she didn't want to because she said he was thinly masking a god concept of himself.
Yeah.
Like cocky.
So good.
And then the next life she has with him, she ends up like screwing him.
Yeah, and she ends up falling in love with him. And then she goes with Magneto, that goes to shit. She goes with Apocalypse, that goes to shit. Like she tries out all these different things, and then she goes toe to toe with Destiny, who is literally like her counterpart. She can read the future or whatever, and it's like a stalemate. Like I don't know. There's just so many cool concepts you can think of with reincarnation being the power. So I thought that was like a tradition of hers or like a historical character, but I love that that's just added in here, and it's such a huge part of it.
Yeah,
It's
and
so interesting.
And the way that like it's not like there are a lot of things that people thought that Hickman just kind of thought up on his own. This is probably one of them, maybe, but a lot of her timelines, her lifespans are actually referenced to old storylines. Like I was saying, the Day of Future Past, that was like an old storyline. The Destiny thing, that's an old storyline that actually just, I don't know if you know that, but Destiny and Mystique were kind of lovers in the past, so there was kind of, there's that deal that towards the end that she makes with Professor Xavier for her to be that silent partner.
Oh, to bring Destiny back. Oh.
Yes. So there's a lot of that in there. And a lot of things that I think we should mention is that in this, he's going back and forth from year 1 to year 100 to year 1000 to the future. And I think what Hickman is trying to establish is where this is going and kind of the outcomes of Mora and kind of the outcomes of where the X-Men are going and what they're trying to avoid. And so one of the biggest things is I think the reason that Professor Xavier is changing is because of Mora's experiences and coming back and telling him. And there's obviously a big reveal at the end of why he does the things he does. And, so it's kind of a big deal what Mora is. And there's actually a discussion of who is the main character on this. Is it Mora or is it Professor Xavier? And that's kind of a discussion out there right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I can see either side.
Yeah.
I don't know, though. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of feel like it's Professor Xavier. Because I think that every time Moira has an experience in her life, one way or another, she always makes her way back to Professor Xavier and tells him about that experience. And then that shifts his mindset. And it seems that however Professor Xavier positions himself is like the biggest changing factor on that timeline. However he positions himself is what kind of decides what happens throughout that timeline. And so based on that, I feel like he's like the main guy.
Yeah.
But whose point of view do you feel like you read the story through? I feel like we read it through Moira. We don't read it through Professor X necessarily. I think he reacts.
I could see that.
I do see Mora. I do see Mora using Professor Xavier more as a tool than the other way around. Like I do.
Oh, for sure.
So I do feel like Mora is which is throughout the story. I thought it was Professor Xavier until you read the whole thing and you realize, holy shit, I just got conned. But that's a Jonathan Hickman kind of thing too.
Just like Professor X.
Yeah.
Got played just like him. I mean, I don't necessarily believe that Professor X is unaware that he's a tool here.
I think she's pretty upfront.
I kind of feel like he just is like down, like whatever it takes to save whoever. Like he'll be whoever's tool to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, he sees himself losing several times through Moira's visions, and then because he can read her mind, he can literally see what she sees. I mean, flat out. So they're creating this haven essentially in Krakoa, and they eventually get to a point where Apocalypse, Magneto, and Xavier are all on the same team, which is so cool. And they all have a mutual threat, who is Nimrod. Now, what's Nimrod's history, JR?
So Nimrod is actually a really cool one. Nimrod comes from the storyline The Day of Future Past, and it's this theory that he is not just like the Sentinels. He's actually something completely different. He is artificial intelligent, but there can only be really one Nimrod. Like, he is the ultimate kind of person. He kind of reminds me of Ultron a little bit, in the fact that Ultron is, no matter what robot you're looking at, it's Ultron. Like, that's him. And so Nimrod is basically the same thing. And in this timeline, the humans and Nimrod have come together and have obviously destroyed the mutants, because the humans are so scared of them. That's how it all starts, right? This is the biggest, everybody knows this. If you watch the animated series, if you read any comics, it's humans versus X-Men. It's because the human race is worried that they're evolving into something different, and they're worried that they're going to be conquered. And so Nimrod is an afterfact of that, and but he's pretty powerful. This is something that there's also been a debate: is can he fights Apocalypse and beats him? Is that just burns him up? And so that's kind of a big debate there too. And so that's where you kind of go into the next scene. You kind of see these new mutants, kind of like they're kind of pieces of older mutants, right? Rasputin and some of these other ones that are in there. They look like a little bit of Colossus, a little bit of Nightcrawler, and they're trying to get some information, and what they're trying to do is get where Nimrod, his origins are from.
And why are they trying to do that?
So they can go back and kill it. And
so they can tell Moira.
Yep.
In that storyline, how Nimrod was created. So then they can kill Moira. So then Moira can be reborn with the knowledge of how Nimrod was created. So then she can stop him from being created.
Correct.
Yeah, and like, so anytime Moira figures out what she needs to know in this life, Wolverine just stabs her in the stomach. Like, all right, you're up, and he just fucking murks her. Like, he always has that epic scene where he murks Jean Grey. He does that like 4 different times to Moira, and then she comes back with the knowledge of the next life and reinforms everybody, which seems like it's a secret weapon. It is a secret weapon, but it seems like it's like almost like, how do you stop that? But Destiny does mention that if she dies as a child before her mutant abilities have developed, she will not come back.
Right.
So that's like the one weakness she has, is she has to die before she's a teen or whatever.
Exactly.
She said she has 10 or 11 lives is what she foresaw for her.
Yeah.
So after Moira finds out how Nimrod is created, her next life, she becomes a fucking assassin. And starts just murking every human that has anything to do with Nimrod's creation.
What's
dude.
that fucking hammer?
Black Widow style sniper from like 200 yards away, just wrecking these people. It's like, wow, dude. Like, that's
was the
rad.
bloodline? What was the bloodline that she was murking? It was the Peter Dinklage that played him in Days of Futures Past. That created like the adaptable Sentinels.
Yes. I forget his name. He's got a weird name. I could never pronounce it, but it's like with a B and a...
But yeah, she takes out like his entire bloodline. Some of these things.
Yep.
But she finds that you kill one weed and 2 more rise in its place,
Yeah, and
and then even in that timeline, though, we should note. So even in that timeline, Moira starts working these guys, and what happens? The Sentinels rise anyway. Artificial intelligence rises anyway, and she dies anyway. And so like the kind of, there's like a theme that plays over all of her lives, and it's that no matter what she does, somehow artificial intelligence, the Sentinels, find a way to be created, rise up, and then destroy the mutants.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's like her first time that we kind of realize, kind of what I think what everybody realizes, and when Apocalypse, and I'll kind of show you guys, but this is kind of that part where Wolverine, he escapes with the data, right? And he goes, "Wake up, Moira, I have it." Apocalypse knew we might be on the clock, so he created some kind of way to force feed the information you need into your mind. Hold still. And it literally this crystal, and this goop comes out of her chest and drags that crystal in there. She gets the information into her brain, and this dark, you kind of get I love the way they do this comic stuff because Wolverine is now a silhouette, right? You no longer see his face, and boom, just right in her gut and ends Mora. And that's kind of what you were saying. Wolverine has to kill her like every time, so that tormented Wolverine is back in there.
I feel like there's a better way to kill somebody than a stab through the stomach. Like that's got to be one of the most
I don't know. I
painful
feel like
ways to go.
Wolverine's probably pretty good at it.
Yeah,
like, I think he can make it quick.
But like a knife to the gut, like you bleed out for hours. I've heard. Like, I don't know,
I think he's putting it through her heart. He's got to be putting it through her heart. He's got to be. He knows what he's doing, dude.
I trust Wolverine. But that scene where they go to the forge to take out the Sentinel like creator or whatever.
Oh, they call that the mother mold.
The mother mold. Yeah, when they go to take out the mother mold, that was such a fucking sick
strike
scene.
team.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a separate timeline. My understanding is we're about to get real confusing here.
Yeah. I think
Okay,
you're right.
but I think
right.
Yeah, go ahead, continue.
But that was one step of the plan, right? Or was that a different plan?
Okay.
Altogether?
So Nimrod was a timeline in the future that didn't work out, right? So Moira had to get killed to get sent back. Well, the timeline so let's call it, X-Men current, where they're developing Krakoa. In that timeline, they find this like human sect of scientists that are like developing this Sentinel shit out in space. The mother, what's it called? The Callers?
It's the Orcus is the group that's putting this big
Orcus right.
is putting this together.
Yeah, and it revolves around the sun, so if it ever gets out of control, they can just ship it into the sun.
Correct. So they're developing Sentinels, and then the mutants of the current in Krakoa find out about it, and they're obviously like, well, that's like the fucking thing we can't have happen. So they develop a team led by the God King of War. And he has the dopest scene where he's like, they're basically telling Cyclops, like, listen, I don't think you guys are going to survive this. And then Cyclops is like, well, does it have to be done? And then Professor X is like, yes, it does. And then he's like, well, then it'll be done. And then he just like, it's like, oh, it's so badass.
And Zach sent that panel to all of us like 3 different times.
Oh my God, it's like the
tatted as a chess
thing.
piece.
God, it's so cool. But anyway, so Cyclops...
It was badass.
It was so savage. So then Cyclops assembles a team, and they fly out to this space station to deal with the threat. But that's current time. That's like not the Nimrod timeline. That's like current timeline.
Right. There's almost like there's a one constant timeline, and it's the timeline where everything is being fixed up because of what Mora can do. Like, and that's kind of, think of that as the meat in your sandwich, right? That's the meat in your sandwich. Like, that timeline is going to be constant because that's the timeline that they are fixing right now, trying to make it the end. And so, and that's a very great, moment for the X-Men is where there's actually a moment where Cyclops is not really sure of himself and Magneto and Xavier kind of standing out in the distance and, Professor Xavier standing like this, and Magneto's like, "What the fuck," and they kind of talk to him and lean into him and say, "Hey, you got this. This is what you're meant for. This is who you are." He's no longer the Dark Phoenix. He's no longer the guy in the background in the last couple of storylines. Because in the last decade or so, Cyclops has kind of been this side character to almost, or this villain. So now he's like, "This is who you are. You are the leader. You can fight for this."
Now he's taking that edge and using it for good.
Yeah, and so it's kind of that classic Wolverine where we started off in the beginning, where nothing's gonna shake his morals. He's gonna go after him, and they send that SEAL team basically to the Orcus, which is another kind of homage when Hickman did the new Avengers, and Tony Stark was building this spaceship out there, and this is what they used for that, by the way. They're using Tony Stark stuff, this Orcus, to continue the mother mold because of who they are.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, if you don't want to know what happens, don't listen, but when they go to fucking destroy that mother mold, shit goes down. So we got, who do we got on the strike team? We got Cyclops, we got Wolverine, we got Nightcrawler, we got Mystique, we got Archangel.
The person I thought was
Jean Grey.
Jean Grey.
Not her.
Jean Grey.
There's another girl, though.
Are you talking about the one that has the claws come out? She's like...
No, the one that said, "Don't touch me" when she came back.
Oh, I don't remember.
Who is that?
Her name is. It's a tough one to say. But yeah, that's the.
There's another girl
and another girl.
She's
but essentially, like
she's very antisocial.
Everyone gets wrecked.
Yeah,
the antisocial
everyone gets
girl.
wrecked. Yeah, they Mystique gets thrown out of into space. Like they just open the fucking blast door. She gets shot out. Archangel gets killed when they have like an explosion on the ship.
Yeah, he don't even get off the he don't even get out the ship.
He dies in the
he's
ship.
the guy that doesn't even make it past the gates.
Oh, Zach, are you talking about the girl that saves Jean Grey by shooting her out into space and then like protects her while she's
doesn't save her though. She ends up dying anyway. But
she dies too. Yeah, and then Nightcrawler teleports Wolverine into the fucking into the actual center of the spaceship, which is exposed to space, so he can just claw at it while he's just decaying, and Nightcrawler implodes, and everybody goes down, and it's like, holy shit. Like
Cyclops gets his head blown off.
Right.
Yeah, Cyclops, he's like, sorry, Jean, not going to make it, and then boom, you see his cracked ass. Like,
exactly, and all the while, Jean, Marvel Girl,
the emotional
Jean
roller
Grey
coaster
is communicating to this kind of like pod of X-Men, Professor, because they're so far out. Professor Xavier needs help, kind of, and this connections. So you got Storm, and you've got Magneto, and you've got this kind of pod of people that she's telling the story of what's happening to them right now, and it's a very, very epic scene. Like you say, Wolverine gets transferred out to the center. And obviously, like you're saying, Nightcrawler can't even last a second. He boosts and he bursts into dust.
He just bursts into
dust. Yeah.
And Wolverine is just like... and it's actually a really great scene there because there's two really great scenes. It's the Cyclops scene where he...
If Hugh Jackman was doing that in space, in theaters, while the fucking thing's
I was just
on a
thinking
collision course to the sun, and he's just fucking tearing apart the metal while he's...
I was just thinking that. I feel like that this entire Strike Force like scene getting sent out to space, so like you have one mission, like, and the scene with Cyclops and then Wolverine at the end. That's a movie, dude. Like that's a blockbuster right here. Like
that gives me goosebumps just thinking about it.
Yeah. And I think it's I'm gonna read this Wolverine scene really quick because I think it's a really kind of dramatic scene. But Nightcrawler is talking to him and he says, "You ready?" And he goes, and Wolverine's like, I gotta ask you, you still think there's something waiting for us on the other side? I mean, there's kind of this belief thing, like, what, am I gonna make it? And Wolverine is a very complicated mutant because it's not just the fact that he can heal, he's had some things added to him because he can heal. So it's not like he can come back with his ultimate powers. Like, he comes back weaker or something, you know what I mean? Like, do I get his adamantium steel is not part of his mutant gene. It's just something they've added to him to make up a weapon.
I didn't think about that. That's true.
And he goes, Nightcrawler goes, worried about your soul, Logan? And just wondering what someone like me should expect. And Nightcrawler goes, when you wake from this earthly slumber, my friend, look for me. I'll be there waiting for you. And boom, they transfer over. And that's kind of like, you kind of see a softer side to Wolverine there. He's like, where do I go when I die? And it's like, who knows, dude? Because you're kind of a serial killer.
Who knows?
Because you're kind of a serial killer, dude.
Kind of a serial killer.
Who knows, man?
And then, of course, Cyclops gets shot in the head by that. I think we forgot to mention, in this storyline, there's, from the beginning and kind of where Nimrod was, there's this being in there. She's kind of a mixed human AI kind of person, and she's on the ship, and she kind of, kills Cyclops, and everybody obviously dies, like you're saying. And at the end of this portion, there's tears coming down Professor Xavier's face, and he's saying, "No more, no more." And I think that was like that was when I read that, I was like, "Holy shit!" Like, this story just took another level here. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, dude. I was like, "Oh my god, everybody's gone."
Yeah.
And then the next thing happens.
Yeah, it's kind of like the end game. We thought this was the end. So then, the next part is kind of. I think what people need to know about Jonathan Hickman is he has explanations for about everything he does. Like, so, and he kind of gives that to you in kind of almost like a cold blast. Like, what is this? You know what I mean? He kind of talks about, and enters Mr. Sinister. And Mr. Sinister is a piece of shit. He's always been a bad guy, and he's always been an asshole.
I have never read him, but I loved him in this story. I thought he was so fucking funny.
And he's kind of always been this kind of sneaky, like, traitor, like double cross kind of person, Actually, and his name was, let's see if I wrote that down. There's so much stuff, man. I'm like, oh my God. But anyways, he started off as a human, and he was wondering about genes, like the human genes, the mutant genes, and he started doing experiments, and he met Apocalypse, and Apocalypse like basically liked him and turned him into Sinister, where Sinister can create any kind of gene and replicate and make clones, and that's kind of where he becomes this, you know.
So he wasn't superpowered at all. He was a regular human being before he met Apocalypse?
Yeah, he was a regular person. His name was Nathaniel Essex before he became Mr. Sinister. And he's kind of like another Ultron, where you're like, is he dead? Is he not dead? Did he transfer his conscience? Like, where is the actual legit Mr. Sinister? And you kind of see that a little bit in this one, where you kind of like, you get tricked a little bit, right?
So cool.
Let me hear it, Jordin.
The Xavier and Magneto, they go to his lair, which is, I don't even know where that's at. But there's just all these Mr. Sinisters around, and there's one on a throne. And they're basically trying to convince him to... This is back in time. They want him to create a hard drive or a file and log the DNA of all of the mutants in the world. So as like kind of like have like on back stock for what if they ever need it down the line. For what I understood, he wants them to create like a database of mutant DNA, basically for all the mutants alive, so they can store it. And this guy is like sitting on the throne, like basically telling him to fuck off. And then he starts like acknowledging Magneto's cape, and he's like obsessed with his cape. Like, that cape is fantastic. And then he has like a right hand guy, and the right hand guy goes, "Yeah, I almost thought about telling you to get one the other day." He goes, "But you didn't." He's like, "Well, no." Then he just fucking like kills him right in front of everybody because he didn't tell him to get a cape. And then it was just like, wait, what? And that was like this. He's just very like in awe about Magneto's cape and how he carries himself wearing a cape. And he kills his right hand man because he didn't tell him to get a cape in enough time. And then while the guy's like, he's not this one's not this Mr. Sinister's not having their plan, another Mr. Sinister comes in and kills him from behind, who's wearing like this ultra like dope ass cape. And he goes, "I'm a mutant, Mr. Sinister. I will listen." And then he kind of like joins their plan. From what I understand, is that how it happened?
Yes, they kind of have to go into this mode of like, do we want to deal with Sinister? But he has something that we need, and we need to kind of team up with him, and that's kind of what happens in that scenario. Like, they know what Hickman showed was this chaos of Sinister. Like, man, this guy is nuts. Like, it's chaotic, and he's just absolutely, like, he talks to himself basically every time. Like, that's who he's doing. He's talking to himself, and he's like going nuts
and killing versions of himself and just like flipping out.
Yeah, and
stupid
so
shit.
they're kind of going in. Like, Hickman showed that they're gonna go into this team up regardless of how crazy it is for their grand purpose. And that's kind of how that scene ends. The next scene kind of talks about say it again, the Krakoa,
yeah.
And it kind of
Krakoa,
and there's kind of how they establish how they're able to communicate with him. Krakoa showed up in a giant size X-Men #1 in 1975 as like almost like a bad guy, and a mutant that ate the X-Men, and they fought them, and it's kind of like this big old plant thing that looked like the Swamp Thing, So, but this is kind of a different version of it.
Yeah, but like the island is alive, right?
It's alive.
Like Krakoa,
yeah, and they
like
use
a
whole being, and they use Cyper, who is like this. That's his mutant powers. He can translate and communicate and create languages for anybody or anything at all times. So that's who
right.
Professor X uses to kind of start talking to Krakoa and kind of get them on the team for what they want. And they kind of talk about the history there and how it broke off from one big land to two different lands, and there's kind of a lot of history there and some mystery as well, so it's really not a lot of details that go into it. But
Apocalypse fought that war though.
Yeah,
he was a part of that battle.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the end of the book there. There's some stuff that talks about the future, and there's this big supreme being that's starting to develop in this background, in year 1000, and talking about ascension. And where did the X-Men go to? Where did the humans go to? Where did the robots go to? And you're kind of Hickman starts to kind of develop that storyline in these books. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot that happens. Like the reason that they needed Mr. Sinister was to create that database. But what did they use with that database? With Cerebro. Like
that's in the next section. Beware.
I mean, are we gonna go into that, or is that too spoilery?
No, let's go into it. I think it's a really important part of why they brought him in.
This part's crazy.
Okay,
yeah.
So basically, my understanding is that they Professor X put together a team of mutants called the Five, and they all had different powers. But if you combined those powers, combined with the database of all mutant genes and that Mr. Sinister created, and Professor X's Cerebro, like his ability to download personalities. I think he ends up downloading the personalities of all mutants. Basically, what they can do is they can resurrect mutants when they die.
Right. And so they
straight up resurrect them.
They created these pods, and you kind of where Professor Xavier. This is kind of where his power goes to another level. He kind of has a backup of every single mutant ever existed, and there's backups and backups. And there's a part later down the storyline of how that got developed. I think we should just go to it now because he's using Shi'ar technology to kind of do that, and he asked Forge, who I picked during my Apocalypse 4. Thank you very much.
I'm sure you loved him, like having such a huge role.
His bandana. His bandana is worse than Gambit's, so it's really hard to really like him.
Wait, what?
Oh, we were talking.
What?
We were talking
Gambit
about.
doesn't have a.
He's got
bad bandana.
He's kind of really
bad.
bad.
He does. He sucks.
He's got a dope ass headband, if that's what you're referring to.
So, but anyways, he asked Ford to create that helmet that he's wearing now, and being able to download every single mutant that he's ever existed, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And he used this Shi'ar technology to do that, and so that's where Sinister comes in, and we kind of go back to where it was at the beginning of the book, where Professor Xavier is walking and he's holding some guy's head that's shooting a little beam out of his eye, and it's Cyclops being reborn from death, right? They all come back, and they kind of go into explanation on how this works and why they did it, and and that kind of transfer of these bodies that look like them, but yet they're not them until Professor Xavier transferred over who they are, and people in mutants themselves wanted to know, is that really them? Is that really Cyclops? Is that really Jean Grey? And so they kind of go through this test with Storm that she promotes, and they're standing there naked in front of everybody, which is weird. But
it's like Adam and Eve.
Yeah, almost like Adam and Eve.
In the Garden of Eden.
And so she goes through that and puts them all through this test. And there's actually things that they say in here that are actually from other storylines down the line, or down the past, like when Storm and Cyclops went to battle over leadership of the X-Men. There's that line in there, and so she convinces them, hey, this is who they are. We can reproduce our own people, and the reason that they're older is because of one of the powers as the guys has is controlling time and able to develop them to being adults where they left.
Yep.
So I think that's right. That's different. I've never seen that before in an X-Men.
That's different.
Pretty different.
They created immortality with a group of mutant powers, and the cool thing is, I mean, Forge, shout out to JR's team, Four Horsemen, Forge.
Yep.
And then I got my boy Elixir on there. Four Horsemen, Elixir appearance. He was in there. You know, like they're just making this shit go cray. And it blows my mind that all these that adds to the Adam and Eve is a perfect represent. It's almost like Krakoa is the Garden of Eden with how they can literally create life eternally in this self-sustainable habitat, and it makes you feel like no matter what goes wrong, everybody just died, you're at the bottom, and all of a sudden you have this hope, and they can just bring them all right back. It's this vision might actually be legit. This world they've created might have a future.
Yeah.
So let's take a time out real quick, and let's just recap everything that we've said so far, because we've talked about a lot of things. We've covered a lot of stuff in this hour for our listeners who have made it this far. So we have Professor Xavier, who lives in a certain timeline. we have him being visited by Moira, who can live multiple lives. In each of these lives, she sees mutants being destroyed by machines. In one timeline, it's Nimrod. In most other timelines, it's the Sentinels. So she comes back to Professor X and has him read her mind, and he sees all those different timelines and all those different ways of failing, basically, mutants' survival. So based on that, he goes to Magneto, teams up with Magneto, and creates a nation state on Krakoa. On Krakoa, he finds a way to literally resurrect mutants from death, and in doing so, he saves the Strike Team, who he sent out to destroy Sentinels while they were in early development. They got sent there, they kill the Sentinels, but they die in the process, and then Professor X resurrects them on Krakoa in time. That's literally where we're at right now.
Yes.
Whew.
Wow.
Good Lord. Yes.
Yeah.
That's like centuries of history right there.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That wraps up this week's episode of The House and Powers of X Part 1. Thank you guys so much for listening, and tune in next week where we break down the second part of the saga, rank the story, and dive beneath the ink with a very interesting concept Zach brings to the table. Catch you guys then.